And when we talk about interest rate impact, it's not just about those who are just seeking loans. It's about those who are already indebted to the banks. Because when you sign off these loans, they will tell you that these things are variable. And it's always going up, it doesn't come down. And for as long as you have this kind of monetary policy stance, interest rates will remain high. And if interest is high, how can the private sector also make its own contribution to the recovery of the economy? That is one major challenge. And to compound that, the government is also borrowing and competing with the private sector at a rate as high as 18%, 20%. I'm talking of treasury bills and federal government bonds. So they have virtually crowded out the private sector in the financial market. So how can private sector bring its own capital to the table? It's very difficult. So that is why you have increasing cases of non-performing loans. You have increasing cases of companies being taken over by AMCON. A major factor in this is the high interest rate. So I'm not too particularly happy that the CBN doesn't still appreciate the impact of high interest rates on investment in this economy. Now, because there is no indication that there is that sufficient sensitivity to how interest rate is impacting on investment. So that is one challenge. The other challenge arising from this is the issue of foreign exchange. Now we have seen some good developments at the retail end of the market, injection into the market, which has improved based in the parallel market. But we need to also address the core players in the economy, the manufacturers, those in the service sector, and the rest of them, and those who are in other, maybe airlines, and that need to remit funds. Of course, there have been improvements on both sides, but there's still a liquidity problem. We still don't have a situation
even
where...
with the everyday intervention that the CBN has been doing?
There's still a liquidity problem. Because the liquidity in this context, because liquidity, let me define it, is about buying or selling anytime that you need it. If as a manufacturer, for instance, you need to import maybe equipment or raw materials worth $100,000, you should be able to go to your bank, and within a day or two, you get it and you do your business. Is that happening now? No. We are still battling, it's still an issue of forward. Of course, there has been some improvement in the forward. We started with 180-day forward. It came down to 90-day forward. Now we are talking of 60 days and 30 days. That is an improvement. But the challenge of liquidity and uncertainty is still there. And all of these improvements are still not rooted in the fundamentals of the economy. There's no fundamentals to support it because it is still basically oil.
In other words, what we're seeing now, like some people would say,
yes.
I mean, as at yesterday, the Naira traded at 430 at the parallel market, even though it depreciated at the interbank market. And for the Naira trade at the parallel market, I mean, most Nigerians will say, okay, things are coming up. But then what we're trying to say now, what we're seeing now may not actually be sustainable.
There's a sustainable risk. Let me put it that way. Because we are trying to run away from creating an economy that will be almost totally dependent on oil. The framework that we have now is totally dependent on oil.
And that's why the central bank governor is saying, let's diversify. Let the fiscal authority play their own part and help to diversify.
How do you diversify?
Look inwards.
You want to diversify at an interest rate of 30%?
To encourage perhaps the local producers to look inwards to source their raw materials inwards.
You need capital. You want to use 30% interest rate to go and diversify? I mean, anybody who has borrowed money in the bank will understand what I'm saying. You know the kind of pressure that will come under if, I mean, this is collateral. You probably have mortgaged your house or some prime properties. And before you know it, the bankers will be running after you. It is not easy to talk about diversification if you have an interest rate that is this high. It's not easy to talk about diversification if foreign investors cannot bring in their capital freely. Because you also need foreign capital. Right now, you don't have a framework that can encourage, because the problem with the foreign exchange market is that there is too much concentration on demand management. And when you are dealing with a supply crisis, you can manage demand, you also address the supply side. There is nothing on the table as we speak to encourage maybe the foreign direct investors to bring in their capital. We should be seeing that kind of policy.
Now, early this month, the federal government came up with what they call economic recovery plan.
Yeah.
Now, looking at the MPC decision, or what the monetary policy is doing so far, is it likely to complement perhaps what the plan wants to achieve?
Well, in the MPC communique, there were several references to the economic recovery and growth plan. They commended it, and they were urging for speedy implementation. But as to whether the outcome is complementing the economic growth plan, I have my doubts. Because if you go through the economic growth plan, there is this promise that we'll have a flexible exchange rate. From what I can see, we don't have any commitment or signal to a flexible exchange rate. That is not consistent with what is in the plan. The plan also talked about a low interest rate regime. We have maintained all the variables. We are still really in tightening mode. If you have CRR also remaining at 22.5%, your liquidity ratio is also at 30%. Your MPR is at 14%. These things have a constraining effect on the capacity of the banks to grant credit. So that again is not consistent with the plan. Then we are talking about coordination between monetary and fiscal policy. The fiscal authorities are running around raising bonds, borrowing money to reflate the economy. The central bank is busy contracting the economy. Because
there's no synergy there.
Because all this tight monetary policy stance is contractionary. I've told you the effect it will have on domestic investors. It has a contractionary effect. So that is not the kind of alignment that you want to. If you want to really reflate the economy, you want to stimulate investment, the two policies work in tandem. Then you have the trade policy component, which has to do with import and export, 41 items and all of that. That is also taking its toll on manufacturers and other players in the economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yusuf, for coming on the program. I can see you're very angry with the CBN government. Don't worry.
No, I'm not angry with CBN.
Okay. Well, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back and look at today at the NSC, just stay with us.